The luxurious restaurant was alive with a quiet hum of conversation, the clinking of fine crystal, and the muted rustle of waiters gliding between tables with practiced elegance. A soft golden glow from chandeliers bathed the room in warmth, highlighting the opulent decor: marble floors, intricately carved wooden panels, and walls adorned with tasteful art. Each table was set with precision, the silverware gleaming under the dim lighting, and the air carried a subtle blend of truffle, aged wine, and fresh herbs. This was a place where the elite dined, where exclusivity was not just a concept but a carefully curated experience. The restaurant catered to high-profile guests, from business tycoons closing million-dollar deals to celebrities escaping the flashing cameras of the outside world. Tonight was no different. Patrons were seated in their designated corners, engaged in hushed conversations, laughter rising in bursts before dissolving back into the controlled atmosphere. Every detail was designed to ensure a seamless experience, a world where sophistication reigned supreme. Through the grand entrance, a figure stepped in, his presence effortless yet commanding. Tall, draped in a tailored suit that balanced casual confidence with undeniable luxury, he moved with a slow, deliberate gait. His accessories, signature chains, stylish sunglasses, and an easy smirk, were unmistakable. This was Snoop Dogg, a name that carried weight across industries, from music to business and beyond. Though he had walked into countless high-end establishments before, there was something refreshing about how he carried himself, never demanding, never arrogant, just cool, collected, and effortlessly himself. A few guests turned their heads, whispering among themselves, some in admiration, others with curiosity. The maitre d', an older gentleman well-versed in handling VIP guests, approached with a respectful nod, leading Snoop to his table near the large window that overlooked the city's skyline. The view was breathtaking, twinkling lights stretching far into the horizon, a reminder of the world beyond the restaurant's refined walls. Snoop settled into his seat, his fingers absent-mindedly adjusting the heavy rings that adorned them. A menu was placed before him, though he barely glanced at it at first. Instead, he observed the room, his keen eyes noting the subtle glances, the stolen looks of admiration, and even the faint skepticism on some faces. It was nothing new. He had been in the public eye for decades, and perceptions always varied. Some saw him as a cultural icon, others as a businessman, and a few still clung to outdated assumptions about who he was. Eventually, he picked up the menu, skimming through the elaborate selection. French cuisine, infused with modern interpretations, dominated the pages: foie gras, truffle-infused risotto, delicately prepared seafood. He let out a quiet chuckle, amused at the sheer decadence of it all. "Man," he muttered to himself, "y'all really love truffles up in here." His voice, though low, did not go unnoticed. A young waiter, Jake, standing nearby, caught the remark. Fresh to the job, eager to prove himself, and prone to quick judgments, he misread Snoop's amusement as ridicule. Adjusting his posture, Jake decided this was his moment to stand firm, unaware that he was about to make a mistake that would change the course of his night. Jake stood near the service station, his notepad in hand, watching as the latest high-profile guest settled in. He had only been working at the restaurant for a short time, but he had already developed a sense of how to handle different kinds of customers. Some were polite, treating the staff with kindness and respect. Others acted as though the restaurant was their personal stage, demanding attention, expecting the world to bend to their every whim. From the moment Snoop Dogg had walked in, Jake had assumed he fell into the latter category. He had seen the way the other diners reacted, their hushed whispers, the stolen glances. Celebrities had a way of drawing attention wherever they went, but Jake wasn't impressed. To him, they were just people who had gotten lucky, enjoying privileges that most could only dream of. When he overheard Snoop chuckling while reading the menu, he immediately assumed it was at the restaurant's expense. His mind filled in the gaps. He imagined the rapper mocking the dishes, laughing at the sophisticated menu that had been carefully crafted by world-class chefs. Taking a breath, he approached the table, straightening his shoulders. He had been taught to be professional, to treat all guests with respect, but a part of him wanted to make it clear that this wasn't a place for jokes. Standing at Snoop's side, he cleared his throat. "Something funny about our menu, sir?" His tone was polite on the surface, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Snoop looked up, slightly taken aback. He wasn't expecting confrontation. His eyes, hidden behind his trademark shades, studied the young waiter for a moment before he responded, his voice smooth, unbothered. "Nah, man. I just ain't never seen this many truffle dishes in one place. Y'all love mushrooms, huh? Jake, still locked in his own assumptions, didn't hear the humor in Snoop's voice. Instead, he felt his pulse quicken, interpreting the comment as a jab. Without thinking, he let the words slip out. Well, maybe you'd be more comfortable at a fast food joint. The words hung in the air, sharp, unexpected. Nearby tables fell silent. A few guests exchanged surprised glances, some whispering among themselves. The maitre d' had been in the middle of greeting another patron when he paused, subtly turning his head toward the scene. Snoop sat still for a moment. His friends at the table stopped their quiet conversation, their attention now fully on him. He slowly leaned back in his chair, tilting his head slightly as if processing what had just been said. He wasn't angry, at least, not outwardly. Instead, there was something unreadable about the way he reacted. His expression relaxed, but holding something deeper beneath the surface. "Respect, young blood," Snoop finally said, his voice steady, almost amused. He didn't argue, didn't escalate. He simply let the words settle, as if giving Jake a chance to realize his own mistake. Jake, however, mistook the calm response for weakness. In his mind, he had just stood up to a celebrity who thought he could walk in and treat the place like a joke. But as he turned away, feeling a surge of pride, the shifting energy in the room told a different story, one he had yet to understand. The air in the restaurant felt heavier than before. The quiet murmurs from other diners carried an undercurrent of unease, and Jake could feel eyes on him as he moved away from the table. He had expected the exchange to earn him some silent approval, maybe even respect from his coworkers, but instead, the energy around him had changed in a way he couldn't quite define. He replayed the moment in his head, the words he had spoken, and the way Snoop had responded. There was no anger, no retaliation, just a calm acknowledgement that unsettled him more than any confrontation would have. At the service station, Jake busied himself, pretending to focus on stacking plates while stealing glances at the table he had just left. Snoop was still sitting there, relaxed as ever, talking to his friends like nothing had happened. His body language hadn't shifted, but the way the people around him reacted told a different story. His friends gave him knowing looks, almost as if they were waiting for him to say something more about the situation, but Snoop simply waved it off with a small chuckle, shaking his head as if dismissing an insignificant moment. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand why, but he felt a strange sense of unease creeping up on him. He had expected a reaction, maybe a demand for an apology, a complaint to the manager, or even an annoyed remark about the service. Instead, he got something far worse: indifference. The fact that Snoop had let it slide so effortlessly made Jake feel smaller than any argument ever could. A senior waiter, a man named Robert who had been at the restaurant for years, walked past Jake and paused just long enough to whisper, "That was a mistake." His tone wasn't scolding, but it carried weight. Before Jake could ask what he meant, Robert was already walking away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. As he continued his shift, Jake noticed the subtle way the staff interacted with Snoop's table. There was an extra level of attentiveness, not out of fear, but out of respect. The maitre d' stopped by the table personally, ensuring everything was to Snoop's satisfaction. Even the head chef, a man known for rarely leaving the kitchen during service, made a brief appearance, exchanging pleasantries with the wrapper before disappearing again. It was clear that Snoop wasn't just another celebrity passing through. He was someone people respected, not just for his fame but for something deeper. The realization hit Jake slowly, like water seeping through a crack in a dam. He had misread the situation entirely. What he had taken for arrogance was nothing more than casual amusement, and what he had assumed was a throwaway celebrity comment had been nothing but a harmless joke. Yet, in his eagerness to prove himself, he had overstepped, letting his own prejudices cloud his judgment. As the night went on, the weight of the moment only grew heavier, pressing down on him with every passing second. Jake moved through the restaurant, taking orders, refilling glasses, and forcing himself to stay focused. But no matter how much he tried to push the incident out of his mind, it lingered. The weight of his words, the way the room had reacted, and Snoop's effortless composure all swirled together in his thoughts. He wanted to believe that he had done the right thing, that standing his ground had been justified. But as the night stretched on, doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. Then, as he carried a tray of drinks past Snoop's table, something caught his attention. The rapper was speaking to his friends, his voice low but clear, weaving a story that made Jake slow his steps. He wasn't eavesdropping intentionally, but the sincerity in Snoop's tone pulled him in. "You know, when I was young, I used to work in a spot kinda like this," Snoop said, leaning back in his chair, a nostalgic smile playing on his lips. "Wasn't fancy, but it was a job. Washing dishes, bussing tables, whatever I had to do to get by." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had never thought of Snoop Dogg as someone who had worked in restaurants. In his mind, celebrities like him had always lived on the other side of the velvet rope, never struggling, never grinding through the kind of jobs people like Jake did every day. But there was no arrogance in Snoop's voice, no attempt to impress, just a quiet honesty. "I remember this one time," Snoop continued, chuckling. "I was bussing a table, and this dude, real high-class type, looked right through me like I wasn't even there. Acted like I wasn't worth the air I was breathing. Man, that stuck with me. Made me promise myself that no matter how far I got, I'd never treat people like they were beneath me." He took a sip of his drink, shaking his head. "Respect, man. That's all it takes." The words hit Jake harder than he expected. His face grew hot, and a pit formed in his stomach as he realized the irony of the situation. He had judged Snoop without knowing a thing about him. He had assumed that a man who had worked hard to earn his place in the world was looking down on the restaurant when, in reality, he understood it better than most. Worse, Jake had done exactly what Snoop had vowed never to do. He had dismissed someone without giving them a chance. As he turned back toward the service station, his legs felt heavier. The truth was undeniable now, sitting in his chest like a stone. He had let his assumptions cloud his judgment, and in doing so, he had not only disrespected a customer but a man who had lived through struggles he couldn't even begin to understand. For the first time that night, Jake wasn't just feeling embarrassed, he was feeling ashamed. Jake couldn't shake the guilt that had settled deep in his chest. Every time he walked past Snoop Dogg's table, he felt a pang of regret, a reminder of the mistake he had made. He had let his assumptions cloud his judgment, spoken without thinking, and now, after hearing Snoop's story, he realized just how wrong he had been. The weight of his words pressed on him, making it impossible to ignore what needed to be done. He had to apologize. The thought of walking up to Snoop's table again made his palms sweat. What if the rapper brushed him off? What if he laughed at him? What if he had already forgotten the entire thing and bringing it up again would only make it worse? But deep down, Jake knew those were just excuses. This wasn't about how Snoop would react. It was about doing the right thing. Taking a deep breath, Jake steadied himself and walked toward the table. As he approached, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. Snoop was mid-conversation, his signature relaxed demeanor unchanged, but as Jake hesitated near the table, Snoop turned his head slightly, raising an eyebrow in acknowledgement. Mr. Dogg?" Jake started, instantly cringing at how awkward it sounded. Snoop chuckled lightly, setting down his drink. "Just Snoop, man," he corrected, his voice smooth and unbothered. Jake swallowed hard and nodded. "Right, listen, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for earlier. I misjudged you, and I let my assumptions get the better of me. That was unprofessional, and it wasn't right." Snoop studied him for a moment, the corners of his mouth curling up just slightly. "You had a chip on your shoulder," he said, nodding knowingly. "Thought I was here to show out, huh?" Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment but nodded. "Yeah," he admitted. "I did. And that was wrong of me. I should have treated you with the same respect I'd give anyone else. No excuses." Snoop leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "it takes a real man to own up to his mistakes. A lot of folks double down, try to act like they ain't wrong, but you came over here and said what needed to be said. I respect that." Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had expected a simple nod, maybe a dismissive wave, but instead, Snoop had acknowledged his apology with kindness. Then, to Jake's surprise, Snoop gestured to the empty seat at the table. "Sit down for a sec," he said with a smirk. "Let me tell you something about life, young blood." Jake hesitated, then, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude, pulled out the chair and sat down, ready to listen. Jake sat at the table, his hands resting nervously on his lap, still not quite believing he was here. The same man he had insulted just hours ago was now inviting him into his world, Not with resentment, but with a kind of ease that made it seem like they had known each other for years. Snoop took a slow sip of his drink, glanced at Jake with that signature smirk, and leaned in slightly as if he were about to share a secret. "You ever thought about what you want to do, man?" Snoop asked, tapping the table lightly with his fingers. Jake blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Snoop shrugged. "I mean this gig. Is it just a job for now, or you got dreams beyond this place?" Jake hesitated, suddenly feeling like he was under a spotlight. No one had ever asked him that, not like this, not in a way that made him really stop and think about it. He had always seen this job as temporary, a stepping stone to something else, but the truth was, he had never been sure what that something else was. "I dunno," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, I like working with people, but I guess I never really figured out what I want to do long term." Snoop nodded, his expression understanding. "Ain't nothin' wrong with that. But let me tell you something. Opportunities don't just land in your lap. You gotta go get 'em. And when you do, you gotta be ready." Jake listened intently, surprised at how much Snoop's words resonated with him. The rapper wasn't just talking down to him or offering generic advice. He was speaking from experience, from a life where every step forward had been earned. "See, people think I just woke up one day and got lucky," Snoop continued, his voice smooth and steady. "But what they don't see is the grind. The late nights in the studio, the times I got told no over and over, the folks who judged me before they even knew who I really was." Sound familiar? Jake's stomach twisted. He had done exactly that, judged Snoop before giving him a chance. And now, sitting here, he realized how many times in life he had probably done the same to others. Snoop chuckled, sensing Jake's realization. "But here's the thing, you learned something tonight. And that's worth more than a paycheck. Now, the real question is, what you gonna do with it?" Before Jake could answer, Snoop reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card, sliding it across the table. "If you ever want to do something different, hit me up. I got businesses, connections, who knows? Maybe there's something out there for you." Jake stared at the card, speechless. This wasn't just an apology accepted, it was a door opening, an unexpected second chance. The night had started with a mistake, but somehow, it was ending with an opportunity he never could have imagined.